So life often becomes very daunting very quickly when we are in some sort of darkness, in some sort of shadow, when we can't see things, when things are just unknown. We're going to be talking today about that unknown shadow in ourselves and why that could be the most scary thing of all, but also the most beneficial when we understand more fully what it truly means. And by doing that, we're going to go through a lot of the philosopher Carl Jung's teachings on what the inner shadow represents and why it's essential for us to start to integrate this shadow self of ourselves, shadow part of ourselves. This shadow part is just the unknown. It's these things that we choose sometimes not to think about. And today we're also going to be integrating some of these awesome metaphors that animals have that can help us and encourage us to more fully integrate this shadow self. What's going on, guys? My name is Jake Smith, and this is Beyond the Physical. On this channel, we try to break down the ideas of philosophy, of spirituality, of esotericness, of science, and we try to break them down in ways that we can internalize them in our lives well enough for us to grow with them and grow using them. So today we're going to be talking about this shadow self and the inner shadow and how we can improve in our lives and what growth opportunities there are as we start to integrate these parts of this shadow self. And we're going to be doing that, like I said, using a handful of means, including a lot of teachings from Carl Jung. Okay, so first off, in this example of the inner shadow or the inner self or shadow work in general, the shadow really means the unknown. The shadow means the unexplored. The shadow means the areas of your life or the areas of yourself that have not had the element of consciousness in them. So you have not taken the time to understand yourself to that level. You have not brought light to yourself. So they say like bringing light to a situation, it really just means like we're going to talk about it. We're going to think about it. We're going to bring consciousness to it, right? So the things in the light, those things are the things we've explored, the things that I know or the things that I brought into truth, the things that I already enjoy about myself, right? In the darkness is these things that I don't know about myself. Who knows? It could be talents, it could be skills, they could be pitfalls, but it will stay in the darkness until we decide to explore it. That's the gist of what Carl Jung's teachings are, is that the more we keep them in the darkness, the more unknown they are, the darker it becomes. Okay, he has a phenomenal quote, and I'm going to read it real quick because it's a little bit long, but so the quote by Carl Jung is, "A man who is possessed by his shadows is always standing in his own light and falling into his own traps, living below his own level." So basically, Carl Jung is saying that you will continually fall into these traps. You'll continually fall into the darkness. It's like walking down a street and seeing a bunch of potholes, but not being very aware and keeping your head up and not paying attention, just stepping into the potholes every time you walk by that same spot. And that will continually happen if you're not willing to start to uncover what it is that is dark, that uncover the shadow that you have. And so this is a lot of what Carl Jung teaches, is that it's great that we know what we know. And it's great to value what we know. It's great to value the experiences we have. So let's try to take these experiences and shed light on the unknown that is within us, this shadow person that is within us, this shadow self. And so people talk, I would say more often nowadays, about shadow work. Shadow work is exactly that. Shadow work is this enlightening of yourself. And really all that is meditation or self-reflection, or, it can be in a handful of ways, is that it's just being more aware of what you're doing. And the more you can examine what you're doing in the now, the more you're able to avoid some of these pitfalls, because now you've shown light onto it. Not only that, there's also Plato's allegory of the cave. And, I learned this in high school. or maybe junior high, I don't really remember. But the allegory of the cave is basically you being in a cave and only being able to see a certain area of your consciousness. And the less you're able or willing to look outside of this small area of what the light is showing, the less you're going to be able to discover more of what the world has to offer. And I use a lot of less and more in technical terms there, but basically, if you keep your head down in the sand, if you keep your head inside the cave, inside this dark cave forever, you're never going to know the benefits of what's out there, or the pitfalls that you keep falling into, or the control that other people take over you. So I also mentioned that I would touch on some animal metaphors. So one of those things is crabs. So crabs have this phenomenal way of protecting themselves, but also developing and growing. Okay, so when a crab starts to realize it's time for itself to grow, it will shed some exoskeleton. So it will shed the outside layer of its skin in order for it to grow, because it's realizing that the essential steps for me to become the person or the creature that I need to become, I need to start shedding some of this stuff. And you could call that the ego or whatever in this metaphor. But what happens when you shed, when the crab sheds, is that it needs to go into darkness. So what it does is it basically removes itself from the light, and it goes sits by itself alone, so that the light doesn't harm it, as well as it's not exposed to other creatures that might try to harm it while it's still very vulnerable. Now, the crab is very vulnerable because it just shed its exoskeleton. It just shed its outer skin, right? So it's very vulnerable. And that's what happens for us as well. When we start to become more and more vulnerable, or we become more and more vulnerable, the more we're able to start to dip into this shadow self. And we feel that, like, when you know what it feels like to be in the darkness, when you feel alone, when you feel like there's not a whole lot of info out there, when you feel like nobody knows what I'm going through, when you feel like you're in the dark, you're thinking dark thoughts. But a lot of times, all that needs to happen is you just to sit there for a little while. And unfortunately, that's just part of life. But the good thing is that just like the crab, the crab has these, basically what will happen for the crab is that in the darkness, the crab ends up creating this outer skin, this outer shell that's very durable against the light and against the predators that are around it. But it has to take time. It has to be by itself a little while in the darkness so I can figure out how to do that. And we're the same way. When we are in the darkness or we're in the unknown, we're by ourselves. A lot of times it's just us trying to figure out what it is we are trying to be, what it is, who it is we're trying to be. And it's our brain trying to figure out what's around us in this dark place, in this unfamiliar, unknown area. And one thing that I think about all the time is, and this doesn't have anything to do with Carl Jung or anything like that, but I do know for a fact that when I am physically in the darkness, and this isn't like a metaphysical, well, it's a metaphysical example, okay? So when I'm in the darkness, I know that it can be kind of freaky if I am completely in the pitch black. But a lot of times, all it takes is for me to be there for like 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 3 minutes for my eyes to adjust to see what is truly out there. And I think that goes a lot along the lines of what we're talking about, is that we can start to see truth in our own lives. We can start to see life in our own life, or truth and light in our own truth and our own light, when we're able to sit in the darkness for long enough, because our eyes adjust. Our eyes start to adjust and we start to see what's around us, but we can only do that if we're able to sit in the darkness for a little while. And I think that is very applicable to this conversation of this inner self. And the benefits that do come is that you can truly explore, truly influence this amount of truth in your life if you're able and willing to sit there in the darkness for a little while. So one of my last points of this video is that that you should not panic if life feels a little bit alone and a little bit dark for a little while. Because the less you can panic, the less it turns into trauma, right? The less you become afraid of specific things. And the more that you can internalize what is truly out there, what is actually going to benefit you. Again, Carl Jung's teachings are so impactful for someone who is trying to explore their own life and to try to take advantage of what's out there for them. I love his teaching. So with that, I feel very lucky to be here. I feel very lucky to be presenting this. My name is Jake Smith, and this is Beyond the Physical. Oh, and I always forget, like and subscribe, because that's how this YouTube thing works. I'm getting a little bit more used to it.